Good morning and welcome back to Concerned Citizens Media. Here are the news for today. The attempted coup against the Dawid Ibsa OLF chairman is a very troubling event for Oromos back home and around the globe. This is a very ugly and dangerous power-thirsty move by some senior members of OLF at this extremely challenging time. This is the time that all Oromos must unite and demand for the release of all Oromo political prisoners and the justice for the suffering of all Oromos under the current Ethiopian government. Mr. Dawid Ibsa, Oromo Liberation Front current chairman, managed this dangerous move in a peaceful manner for now. He let it be known to the enemies and friends of Oromos that the resistance and the quest for complete freedom of Oromos and Oromia will continue regardless of the leadership. The people know what they want and they will not stop until they get it. He also repeated his call for the Abiy Ahmed and his administration to stay out of the internal affairs of Oromo Liberation Front. Concerned Citizens Media is calling upon these bastard and power-thirsty individuals to stop these dangerous and anti-Oromo moves at this time and advise them to focus on the big picture of the time, which is freeing Oromos from dictatorship and from unimaginable sufferings. Qeeroo called for Laganna or embargo on Ethiopia and on Abiy Ahmed administration for indefinite time starting Monday, August 3, 2020. This Laganna or embargo is targeting all transportation activities in and out of Oromia region, all goods and commodities coming in and going out of Oromia towns and cities. It also calls for business owners to shut down their doors until further notice. Qeeroo's call for this Laganna or embargo to put economic, social and political pressure on Mr. Abiy Ahmed and his administration so that the will of the Oromos will be respected and all Oromo political prisoners such as Johar Mohammed, Baqqala Garba, Hamza Borana, Abdi Raggasa, Mikhail Borana, Colonel Gammachu Ayana and other innocent Oromos are released from unsafe and overcrowded prisons. Qeeroo make it clear that their resistance does not stop until complete freedom is achieved in Oromia for all Oromos and for others suffering with them. The Ethiopian government is attempting to shift the focal point. Ethiopia is becoming a very dangerous place for its citizens, especially for Oromos. Amnesty International and other human rights organizations reported about severe human rights violations in Ethiopia. Thousands and thousands of Oromos are arrested and thrown into the overcrowded prison cells and public schools. Oromos are under constant military command posts and torture, killings and other abuses are commonly, especially in Oromia. People are suffering from expensive basic food items and other necessity goods. Unemployment, especially for youth, is skyrocketing. Basic health services are challenging for most of its citizens. So, the Ethiopian government is systematically, with its prosperity cadres propaganda, calling on citizens to come out and show their support for the hydro dam project water filling, and to show the global community that the country is in a stable and a positive mood. In reality, Ethiopia and the Ethiopians, especially Oromos, are in need of immediate intervention from global nations to save them from ongoing dangerous political and military operations. The celebrations we are witnessing in towns and cities cannot hinder the challenges 60 million Oromos are suffering today in Ethiopia under Abiy Ahmed's leadership. The Ethiopian government is illegally freezing the bank accounts of Johar Mohammed, Baqqala Garba, OMN Media, and its journalists. Now, all political prisoners and their families are the victim of these government moves. Their wives and children are struggling to feed themselves and to buy basic medicines for them. The prisoners are also struggling to cover their legal costs for their lawyers. Also, extending their court trials repeatedly led them for further unnecessary financial costs and emotional stresses. The government is fishing for cases and reasons to keep them in jail. Such intimidating tactics were common during the TPLF-dominated Ethiopia administration, and Abiy Ahmed is adapting them again to damage his political opponents. The GoFundMe is already started to help or cover the legal expenses for Johar Mohammed, Baqqala Garba, Hamza Borana, and other Oromos. Oromos and friends of Oromos are encouraged to donate to this cause and free these unfairly and illegally targeted Oromo politicians from those unsafe prisons. Dejane Gutama, editor-in-chief of Oromo Media Network, is safely back to his hometown in Canada. He highlighted about the challenges the Oromo Media Network journalists were facing even before the days of Hachalu Hundessa. The Ethiopian government was using various intimidating tactics on Oromo Media Networks and its journalists, such as turning off electric power, shutting off the internet, and threatening Oromo Media Network journalists about their reporting. Concerned Citizens Media is grateful for Dejane Gutama for getting out safely from Ethiopia and joining his family in Canada. He is and will be a tremendous asset for Oromo's causes. That's all the news I have for today, and thank you for listening. I'm gonna close for the short clip about the relationship between the United States and China. I reported last time about the ongoing relationship problem between China and America, and this is a additional uh, measures the American government is uh, taking on China. Actually, it is the things are getting worse every day, and concerned citizens media doesn't know the end, but it doesn't look like going in the right direction. So America is not happy about China relations with Iran and China relations with other Hong Kong, and so they just doing their best, but the relationship is spoiling for the worst. And uh, I just added for you for additional global understanding. So this step is about Secretary Pompeo interview on the issue of the relationship between China and uh, United States. So that's all I have, and just listen to this interview, and until next time, so long from Concerned Citizens Media. Be safe. See you again.
And first up this morning, the China challenge as Beijing's Communist Party pushes to expand its influence over the free world. According to a new survey by the Pew Research Center, 73% of Americans now have an unfavorable view of China, up 7 points since March. That has not stopped U.S. companies from investing there. The NBA under fire, for example, this week, after an ESPN report said that human rights abuses are happening at their training academies in China's Xinjiang region. This as the United States adds sanctions on China's paramilitary in that region over the brutal treatment of ethnic minority Uyghurs. Joining me right now with his reaction and the state of affairs right now between the U.S. and China is U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, it's great to have you this morning. Thanks very much for being here.
Marie, it's great to be with you this morning on this important topic.
So I want to start with the U.S. sanctioning the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corporation and two of its officials for their connection to the human rights abuses in Xinjiang. Tell us about this company, its reach, why these sanctions are important in terms of moving the needle on what's taken place.
Well, the risk to the people in that region has been great. I've talked about this as the greatest human rights violation of this century to date. And what we've attempted to do is make clear to China, if you want to participate on the world stage, you can't engage in behavior like this. So we've begun to impose sanctions on the individuals and businesses involved. Through this most recent set of sanctions put out by the Department of Treasury will put the businesses operating there on notice. They've got to change their behavior. They've got to stop using slave labor. They've got to stop participating in these systems that have been connected to forced sterilizations, forced abortions. These are terrible, terrible things that are taking place there. And we're going to impose real costs on those businesses. This company is involved in the cotton trade and so has deep connectivity to Western businesses, including those in the United States. And we've been very clear. We've told U.S. businesses to take a real deep look into their supply chains. I don't think companies, some brand names here in America, want to be connected to what's taking place there.
Well, we mentioned the NBA. We were showing video as you were talking. This video was shot in 2018, but it clearly shows the Uyghurs being lined up, blindfolded in some cases, being taken somewhere. Do American companies not understand what has taken place here? For example, the NBA, other companies that want to do a deal, want to get to Microsoft wanting to acquire TikTok in a moment. But do you think corporations are getting the national security issues that you have laid out over the last couple of years?
Maria, I think they're starting to become more aware of it, to be awakened to the challenges this presents to their brand, to their company, their supply chain. I think they're starting to see that. But as we've discussed before, I think all across the world, for an awful long time, we didn't recognize the threats posed to freedom, the authoritarian nature of the regime there, and so we let things go on that we shouldn't. I'm very hopeful these businesses will evaluate what's going on and then make the right decisions for their businesses. I'm confident that they will.
We have news this morning that Microsoft has put on pause its plans to acquire TikTok, the U.S. operations of this video sharing app. Peter Navarro was with us last week on this program. Here's what he said about TikTok. I've got to get your take on this very popular app for young people. Here's Peter Navarro.
What the American people have to understand is all the data that goes into those mobile apps that kids have so much fun with and seems so convenient, it goes right to servers in China, right to the Chinese military, the Chinese Communist Party, and the agencies which want to steal our intellectual property. Those apps can be used to steal personal and financial information for blackmail and extortion. They can be used to steal business, intellectual property, and proprietary secrets.
What happened with TikTok, Secretary?
Well, here's what I hope that the American people will come to recognize. These Chinese software companies doing business in the United States, whether it's TikTok or WeChat, there are countless more. As Peter Navarro said, are feeding data directly to the Chinese Communist Party. Their national security apparatus could be their facial recognition pattern. It could be information about their residents, their phone numbers, their friends, who they're connected to. Those are the issues that President Trump's made clear we're going to take care of. These are true national security issues. They're true privacy issues for the American people. And for a long time, the United States just said, well, goodness, if we're having fun with it or if a company can make money off of it, we're going to permit that to happen. President Trump has said enough, and we're going to fix it. And so he will take action in the coming days with respect to a broad array of national security risks that are presented by software connected to the Chinese Communist Party.
I mean, even if Microsoft were to acquire the U.S. assets of TikTok, can you really believe that the China surveillance is gone from U.S. operations of TikTok?
Maria, I promise you, the president, when he makes his decision, will make sure that everything we have done drives us as close to zero risk for the American people. That's the mission set that he laid out for all of us when we began to evaluate this now several months back. We're closing in on a solution, and I think you'll see the president's announcement shortly.
Secretary, I want to ask you about FBI Director Christopher Wray speaking to the Senate Intel Committee in the last week, and he warned about China's increased capability to interfere in U.S. elections, saying that these were classified hearings to the Senate Intel Committee to this week, saying that China has developed an ability to interfere with local elections and target members of Congress to influence China policy. What can you tell us?
Well, Maria, I don't want to say much more than you just described there. The rest of the information is classified. But make no mistake about it, I talked about this back in February to the National Governors Association. The Chinese Communist Party, and you saw this with our closure of the consulate in Houston, is running espionage operations inside the United States and attempting deep influence targeting of American business leaders, of American congressmen, of city council members. We saw it happen up to a state senator in Wisconsin. This is a deep effort to conduct influence operations to undermine American democracy and put our nation at risk. This administration, President Trump, for the first time, has said, this is enough of this. We're going to fix this, and has given us all the guidance, and you've seen us act on it, whether it was what we did to the consulate with Houston. You saw the FBI indict several PLA members who were studying here in the United States, engaged in activity that was clearly unlawful. We're taking seriously this threat. We're going to protect the American people from these Chinese influence operations.
Well, I mean, this week Dianne Feinstein praised China as a respectable nation, she said. Why do some in Congress not say the same thing that you've been saying, that this administration has been communicating? There doesn't seem to be an all-out agreement within the Congress. on this?
Maria, I saw the statement from Senator Feinstein. I found it perplexing. I saw statements from senior American CEOs of the big tech companies this week say they hadn't heard or seen about intellectual property theft in the United States. That's crazy talk. Here's the good news. The good news is we're getting nearly every member of Congress aligned along the administration's policies on China. When we voted about Hong Kong freedom, there were over 400 votes in the House and nearly every vote in the Senate. The same with respect to what's taking place in Western China, the human rights violations. I think the tide is turning. I think not only here in the United States, but all across the world, the threat from the Chinese Communist Party is becoming clearer and clearer, and nations that are like-minded all across the world are beginning to come together to rebalance, to push back against this, to protect our freedom and democracy. I talked at the Nixon Library about this being a battle not between the United States and China, but between authoritarianism and freedom. That's the fight the world needs to be engaged in. I hope we get every member of Congress on board on the side of freedom.
I mean, I was particularly struck by Dianne Feinstein because didn't she have a driver for 20 years that we ended up finding out was a Chinese spy?
We did. You'll recall she meets with some frequency with Foreign Minister Zarif there too. There's something not quite right. I mean, and this is not consistent. This is not consistent with America's national security. In either case, these are adversaries that intend harm for the citizens of her state of California. And I wish that she would not engage in this kind of rhetoric and these kind of meetings that undermine America's efforts.
Yeah, there seems to be a new angle here, and that is the Chinese Communist government trying to compromise certain Democrat members of Congress who are against President Trump. We'll keep watching that. I want to ask you about how China is using the new security law and what has taken place in Hong Kong now, Secretary, because Hong Kong is now delaying its election for a year. They're talking about COVID-19 being the issue. Your reaction?
Well, COVID-19 is not the reason for the delay in the election. The reason for the delay, there was scheduled to be an election in Hong Kong on September 6th. The reason for the delay is that the Chinese Communist Party candidates would be crushed, and the freedom-loving people of Hong Kong would prevail. And the leadership in Beijing simply can't permit that to happen. Look, this is part of what we're seeing happen all across the threat from the Chinese Communist Party. Increased denial of freedom for people in their own country, and then extending that now to people outside of their country. That national security law can be applied to people all across the world. It has extraterritorial provisions in it, saying that someone who so much as speaks against freedom in Hong Kong has violated the national security law and is under threat from the Chinese Communist Party. This is a new and increased scope, and it's the kind of thing we've seen as the direction of travel from the Chinese Communist Party under General Secretary Xi.
So, I mean, do you expect an election ever in Hong Kong? I mean, in that speech you referred to at the Nixon Library, you said that, we are seeing the tide turn. I mean, you just said that a lot of our allies understand the threat. Do you believe the U.S. has alliances here? I mean, we know that India has banned those 59 apps. We know that the UK has come around in terms of not using Huawei for its 5G. We know what's happened in the South China Sea. What about Western Europe? What about Spain and Germany and Italy? Do you feel you've got the support from the rest of the world?
Well, it's better than it was 6 months ago and increasing. I think the whole world sees this. It's not because America asked these countries to engage in activity that pushes back against the Chinese Communist Party that they ought to do it. They ought to do it because it's in their nation's sovereign best interest to do so, and we're seeing it, whether it's in the Czech Republic or in Malaysia and Vietnam. All across the world, countries are coming to understand the challenges that the Chinese Communist Party presents, and that the United States will be there. That the United States will be there to lead this push to ensure that the next century remains a free and democratic century, not one that is governed by the rules of the road laid down by this communist regime.
Secretary, I want to move on to Iran because now we understand that Beijing is set to be in the final stages of approving a $400 billion economic and security deal with Tehran. In addition to the massive infrastructure investments, Forbes is reporting that this agreement is closer cooperation on defense and intelligence sharing. What are the implications, Secretary?
Well, it shouldn't surprise you that regimes that don't respect freedom at home and foment national security problems abroad would want to join hands. We will be sure to enforce all the provisions we have, all the sanctions we have on the Islamic Republic of Iran applied to the Chinese Communist Party and their businesses and state-owned enterprises as well. And I think countries in the Middle East should see this for what it is as well. China's entry into Iran will destabilize the Middle East. It'll put Israel at risk. It'll put the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the Emirates at risk as well. Iran remains the world's largest state sponsor of terror. And to have access to weapon systems and commerce and money flowing from the Chinese Communist Party only compounds that risk for that region.
Should we expect new sanctions against Iran?
So we filed some new sanctions just this Friday. We expanded their sanctions on their metals programs. And then in October, we have a significant provision of the JCPOA that expires, the first major provision to expire. It'll allow the Chinese and the Russians to sell weapon systems to Iran, and then allow Iran to sell those weapon systems and other arms around the world as well. The United States has been working since 2018 to try and stop this provision from expiring, and in the United Nations in just the next handful of days we'll present a Security Council resolution aimed at doing just that. I hope the whole world can understand that allowing Iran to buy and sell weapons is really, really dangerous.
Yes, of course. Secretary, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks
Thank
very much
you,
for being.
Okay, that is the challenge for current U.S. leadership, and that will be the challenge for maybe if Biden will be the president, maybe if he was winning the White House, is gonna wait for him. So they got to find a mechanism to deal with China. China is a superpower like the United States, and they got a nuclear bomb. They have a veto power in the United Nations, and they cannot be easily defeated by minor tactics or sanctions. So this is the challenge. This is a challenge that we all have to pay attention, in addition to the other challenging situations we have in Ethiopia and the political challenges we have in Ethiopia, the suffering of the Oromos, the mass arrest, the burning of their properties, and the intimidation, and the ongoing counseling and requesting more time on political prisoners just from time to time because they don't have credible evidence, so they are just keep looking for more time so they can damage them in jail, or they may be exposed to COVID-19. So we have to keep watching the news from back home, and also the news the United States faces with the international community. And China is a challenge. The other issues also in the Middle East, something going on between Israel and Lebanon. That is a turmoil area too. So we are part of the international community. We are living in a global community. We have to watch, and we have to, if we can do something, we can do it. If you can influence through talking to our representatives, we can do it. But it's better to have updated on all local, state, federal, and global issues. Thank you for listening, Concerned Citizens Media again. See you next time. So long for now, and be safe.